Hi guys, today I'm going to read chapter 5 of Pesquella. It's called The Great Blue Ocean. On the final day of our journey to the sea, we crossed the last range of mountains. Far down the trail, we caught our first glimpse of the Great Blue Ocean. Everyone stopped to gaze upon the vast ocean below us. I stared at the water sparkling in the sunlight as the waves rolled in to touch the golden strip of sand. The water crashing against the rocks sounded like mean Pumuk, the thunder maker, smashing things and making big thunder. Cool ocean breezes brought us the smell of seaweed, and all of us could taste salt when we licked our lips. As we followed the path down to the ocean, I became more and more excited. When we finally reached the beach, I ran toward the water. My feet sank into the cool, soft sand. The water rushed toward me, and as I returned to run away, I felt the sand swirling under my feet. The foamy water splashed against my legs and almost knocked me over. Suddenly, the water slipped back into the sea, and there I stood, my feet buried in the sand. As far as I could see, there was nothing but beautiful blue water. We camped in a protected area near the seashore where we spent the next few weeks fishing and gathering shellfish. I liked helping my mother and the other women gather the glistening shellfish from the large rocks on the beach. When the waves swept out to sea, the men used their blades to scrape abalone, mussels, barnacles, and turban snails from the rocks. I filled a small basket with the shellfish and raced back to the high ground just before the waves came crashing back against the rocks. The men went into the deeper waters and netted rockfish. Many times I watched them drag nets filled with shimmering fish onto the beach. I helped the women clean the fish, and then the fish were dried over low fires. Many days went by before the fish were dry enough to be packed into burden baskets. Soon we would carry the baskets back to our village. One morning, when the tide was out farther than usual, the women and children went down to the beach to gather seaweed from the rocks. Because the tide was so far out, we walked on the rocky floor of the ocean. In the distance, we could hear the pounding and crashing of the angry ocean waves. Mother told me that we had to move quickly across the rocks because soon the tide would come back and cover the rocks where we stood. Pools of water had been left behind as the tide went out, and in these tide pools I saw pink crabs and tiny fish. In some of the small pools, sea anemones and sea urchins blossomed like flowers. What fun it was to drop tiny pebbles onto these creatures and watch them quickly close their long tentacles. As we collected seaweed into baskets and nets, the women and children began to spread out among the tide pools and rocks and move away from the shore. For a while I stayed with the others, and then I found myself following a long tide pool that seemed to have no end. I looked down into the tide pool and saw colorful sea slugs, tiny shiny fish darting about, and giant chitons that clung to the sides of the rocks. I reached out into the tide pool, and the clear water suddenly turned dark. It was a baby octopus spurting its ink so I couldn't see it. The octopus had been trapped in the tide pool when the tide had moved out to sea. I knelt by the pool, waiting for the water to clear so I could catch the octopus. Suddenly, I heard the roar of the ocean and water splashed against my legs. I jumped up and saw that the ocean waves were quickly beginning to come back to shore. The tide pool I had been following had led me far, far from the beach, and I knew I had to get back to shore. Running as fast as I could toward the beach, the water rose higher and higher. I jumped from rock to rock, gasping for breath. I reached safety. I turned and saw that rocks and tide pools were gone. They were covered by the swirling ocean waters. After several weeks, the time had come for our return trip to our valley. The evening before we left, a great feast was held to celebrate our good catch of fish. The women prepared baskets of fish for everyone to enjoy. I ate fish and shellfish that I had not tasted before. Mother showed me how to bite off the tip and sip the juices from the horn snail she gave me. We tossed the empty shells onto a shell mound. I kept the prettiest shells in my carrying pouch. My shells would always remind me of my first trip to the great blue ocean.